The Admiral teased her about her call sign until Night Fox dropped and the whole command room went silent. Lieutenant Sarah Chen had always been different from the other pilots at Naval Air Station Oceana. While her colleagues earned call signs like Maverick or Iceman through flashy maneuvers and cocky attitudes, Sarah's call sign came from something much quieter but far more deadly. The morning started like any other Tuesday in the command center. The large screens displayed satellite feeds from the Mediterranean, where tensions had been rising for weeks. Admiral Richard Hayes, a decorated veteran with 30 years of service, was reviewing mission reports when Sarah walked into the briefing room. Well, if it isn't our Night Fox," Admiral Hayes said with a smirk, not looking up from his papers. "Tell me, Lieutenant, how did a pilot who barely speaks above a whisper end up with such a theatrical call sign?" The other officers in the room chuckled quietly. This had become a running joke among the senior staff. Sarah Chen was known for being incredibly quiet, almost invisible when she wasn't flying. She rarely spoke during briefings unless directly asked, never boasted about her missions, and seemed to blend into the background during social gatherings. "Sir, it was assigned to me during training," Sarah replied simply, her voice calm and steady as always. "Oh, come on," the Admiral continued, finally looking up with an amused expression. "Call signs are earned, not assigned. What did you do? Sneak around the barracks at night? Steal someone's MREs?" More chuckles filled the room. Sarah stood at attention, her expression unchanged. She had learned long ago that responding to such comments only made them worse. Besides, she knew the truth about her call sign, and that was enough. What the Admiral and most others didn't know was that Sarah's call sign came from her unprecedented performance during a classified night training exercise 2 years earlier. She had been part of an advanced tactical program, operating alone in enemy territory simulation for 72 hours straight. While other pilots had been detected within hours, Sarah had moved through the exercise like a ghost, completing objectives that seasoned instructors thought were nearly impossible. The exercise had been designed to test pilots' abilities to operate behind enemy lines, gathering intelligence and striking targets without being detected. Most participants were discovered by day 2. Sarah had not only remained undetected for the entire duration, but had also completed every single objective while providing real-time intelligence that helped other teams succeed. Her commanding officer during that exercise, Colonel Martinez, had watched the thermal imaging feeds in amazement. "She moves like a fox in the night," he had said, "quiet, intelligent, and absolutely lethal when she needs to be." But Sarah never talked about that exercise. It remained classified, and only a few people knew the real story behind her call sign. To everyone else, she was just the quiet pilot who somehow ended up with a name that seemed too big for her personality. "Maybe she got lost during a night flight," suggested Commander Brooks, another senior officer. "Had to radio for help like a lost fox cub." "That must be it," Admiral Hayes nodded, clearly enjoying himself. "Our little Night Fox probably needed a GPS tutorial." Sarah remained silent, but Lieutenant Mike Torres, who had been her wingman during several missions, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had flown with Sarah enough times to know that her navigation skills were flawless, and her situational awareness was better than anyone he had ever seen. The briefing continued with routine updates about patrol schedules and maintenance reports. Sarah listened carefully, taking mental notes of everything that might be relevant to her upcoming missions. She had learned to filter out the jokes and comments, focusing instead on the information that mattered. As the meeting was about to conclude, an urgent communication came through on the secure channel. The communications officer, Petty Officer Williams, looked up from his console with a serious expression. "Sir, we have a Priority 1 message from CENTCOM," he announced. Admiral Hayes straightened up immediately. Priority 1 communications were reserved for the most urgent situations, active threats, hostage situations, or imminent military action. Put it on the main screen, the Admiral ordered. The satellite feed switched to a secure video link. On the screen appeared General Patricia Morrison, a stern-faced woman with short gray hair and intense blue eyes. Behind her, Sarah could see the busy operations center at Central Command. "Admiral Hayes," General Morrison began without preamble, "we have a situation developing in the eastern Mediterranean. 3 hours ago, a civilian cargo ship, the Aurora Dawn, was hijacked by an unknown hostile force, approximately 40 nautical miles north of Cyprus." The room fell silent. Every officer leaned forward, understanding that this was not a drill or routine operation. General Morrison continued, "The ship is carrying humanitarian supplies bound for refugee camps, but intelligence suggests the hijackers may be using it as cover for something more sinister. We've lost all communication with the crew, and satellite imagery shows the vessel has changed course towards Syrian territorial waters." Admiral Hayes frowned. "What's the current tactical situation, General?" "Complicated," Morrison replied grimly. "The hijackers have sent a message claiming to have explosive devices throughout the ship. They're demanding safe passage to a port under hostile control. However, our intelligence indicates this may be a cover story for a larger operation." She paused, consulting a tablet before continuing. "Analysis of the ship's new trajectory suggests they may be planning to use it as a platform for launching an attack on Allied naval forces in the region. The timing coincides with intelligence reports of a planned assault on our Mediterranean fleet." The Admiral's expression grew serious. "What are our options?" "Limited. The ship is in international waters moving toward a heavily defended area. Any conventional assault would likely result in civilian casualties and could trigger a larger conflict. We need a surgical solution. Someone who can get close without being detected, assess the real situation, and neutralize the threat if necessary." Admiral Hayes nodded slowly. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "The ship will reach Syrian territorial waters in approximately 18 hours. Once it crosses that line, our options become extremely limited. We need to act within the next 12 hours, preferably during the next period of darkness." The general's image flickered slightly as the satellite connection adjusted. "Admiral, I'm going to be direct. This mission requires a pilot with very specific skills. Someone who can operate alone in hostile territory, gather intelligence without being detected, and strike with precision if needed. Do you have anyone who fits that profile?" Admiral Hayes looked around the room at his officers. He had several excellent pilots, but this type of mission required someone with specialized training in covert operations. Most naval aviators were trained for air-to-air combat or standard bombing runs, not solo infiltration missions. "General, most of our pilots are trained for conventional operations. This sounds like something that would normally go to Special Forces." "Normally, yes," Morrison replied. "But Special Forces assets are committed to other operations, and we don't have time to reposition them. Besides, this situation requires someone who can approach by air, assess from a distance, and potentially engage from the air if needed. We need a pilot, Admiral, but not just any pilot." Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly. The description of the mission matched exactly the type of operations she had trained for during her classified exercises. But she remained silent, knowing it wasn't her place to volunteer for such assignments. General Morrison glanced at something off-screen before continuing. "I've reviewed the personnel files for your air wing, Admiral. There's one pilot who shows unusual qualifications for this type of mission. Highly rated in night operations, excellent marks in reconnaissance training, and—" She paused. "Some interesting notes in her classified training records." Admiral Hayes looked confused. "Which pilot are you referring to, General?" "Lieutenant Sarah Chen. Call sign, Night Fox." The room fell completely silent. Every head turned toward Sarah, who remained standing at attention, her expression unchanged. Admiral Hayes blinked in surprise, clearly not expecting to hear that name. General Morrison's voice cut through the silence. According to her training records, Lieutenant Chen completed advanced covert operations training with the highest marks in program history. Her instructors noted exceptional abilities in stealth operations, night navigation, and solo mission execution. The Admiral's smirk from earlier had completely disappeared. He looked at Sarah with new eyes, realizing that there was clearly much more to the quiet pilot than he had understood. Lieutenant Chen, General Morrison addressed Sarah directly through the screen. Are you familiar with maritime interdiction operations? Yes, ma'am, Sarah replied, speaking clearly and confidently. I completed specialized training in ship-based reconnaissance and precision targeting during my advanced tactical course. Good. Can you brief me on your night operations experience? Without hesitation, Sarah began speaking in a clear, professional tone that surprised everyone in the room except Lieutenant Torres. Ma'am, I have over 200 hours of night flight time, including 40 hours of solo operations in simulated hostile environments. I'm certified in low-altitude approach techniques, electronic warfare countermeasures, and precision targeting systems. My most recent evaluation scores were 96% for night navigation and 98% for target identification under low-light conditions. The transformation was remarkable. The quiet, almost invisible pilot had suddenly become someone entirely different, confident, knowledgeable, and clearly very competent. General Morrison nodded approvingly. Lieutenant, this mission would involve flying alone at night, approaching an unknown hostile situation, gathering intelligence without being detected, and potentially engaging if civilian lives are at immediate risk. Are you prepared to accept such an assignment? Sarah didn't hesitate. Yes, ma'am. I am ready. Admiral Hayes stared at Sarah as if seeing her for the first time. The pilot he had been joking about just minutes earlier was speaking with the confidence and knowledge of a seasoned special operations officer. General Morrison's expression was serious, but showed a hint of approval. Very well, Lieutenant Chen, you'll receive detailed mission briefings within the hour. Admiral Hayes, please ensure Lieutenant Chen has access to whatever aircraft and equipment she needs. This mission is classified at the highest levels. Of course, General, Admiral Hayes replied, still looking somewhat stunned by the turn of events. One more thing, Admiral, Morrison added before ending the communication. The success of this mission could prevent a significant escalation in the region. Lieutenant Chen, the entire Mediterranean fleet will be counting on your success. The screen went dark, leaving the command room in tense silence. Every officer stared at Sarah, who remained at attention, waiting for orders. Admiral Hayes cleared his throat. Lieutenant Chen, it appears I owe you an apology. And apparently, I have some reading to do about your actual qualifications. No apology necessary, sir, Sarah replied simply. Permission to begin mission preparation? Granted. Commander Brooks, please ensure Lieutenant Chen has full access to our intelligence files on this situation. Lieutenant Torres, I want you to oversee aircraft preparation. As the officers began moving to execute orders, Admiral Hayes remained behind, studying Sarah with new respect and considerable curiosity. He realized that the quiet pilot he had been teasing was about to undertake one of the most dangerous missions in recent memory, and based on what he had just learned, she might be the only person capable of pulling it off. The Admiral teased her about her call sign, until Night Fox dropped and the whole command room went silent. 2 hours later, Sarah stood in the secure briefing room, studying detailed satellite images and intelligence reports spread across a large table. The transformation in how others treated her was immediate and complete. Officers who had barely acknowledged her presence before now spoke to her with respect and deference. Commander Brooks handed her a thick folder marked Classified, Eyes Only. Inside were photographs of the hijacked ship, crew manifests, and intelligence assessments of the probable hostile forces involved. The Aurora Dawn is a medium-sized cargo vessel, approximately 400 feet long, Brooks explained, pointing to detailed schematics. Normal crew complement is 18, but we don't know how many hostiles are aboard. The ship's manifest shows it was carrying medical supplies, food, and temporary housing materials for Syrian refugee camps. Sarah studied the images carefully, noting the ship's layout, potential approach vectors, and defensive positions. Her mind automatically began calculating flight paths, timing, and contingency plans. "What's our intelligence on the hijackers?" she asked. Lieutenant Commander Davis, the intelligence officer, pulled up additional photographs on the digital display. Preliminary analysis suggests this is not a typical piracy operation. The group that claimed responsibility has never been involved in maritime hijacking before. They're primarily known for land-based terrorist activities in the region, which suggests this is likely a cover for something else, Sarah concluded. Exactly. We believe the ship is being used as a mobile platform for a larger operation. Intelligence intercepted communications suggesting an attack on Allied naval forces, possibly using the humanitarian cargo as a disguise to get close to our vessels. Sarah nodded, continuing to study the tactical situation. "What's the current position and heading?" "The ship is here," Davis pointed to a location on the digital map. "Approximately 35 miles northeast of Cyprus, heading toward the Syrian coast at 12 knots. At this speed, they'll reach territorial waters in about 15 hours. Weather conditions: favorable for night operations, clear skies, minimal wind, new moon providing optimal darkness. Sea state is calm with 2-foot swells." Sarah appreciated the thoroughness of the briefing, but she was also aware that time was critical. Every minute that passed brought the ship closer to waters where military intervention would become much more complicated. "What aircraft will I be using?" she asked. Lieutenant Torres spoke up from across the room. "We have an FA-18E Super Hornet configured for reconnaissance and precision strike. It's equipped with advanced targeting systems, electronic warfare countermeasures, and extended-range fuel tanks for long-duration missions. Armament: 2 AIM-120 air-to-air missiles for self-defense, 4 AGM-65 Maverick precision-guided missiles, and a full load for the 20mm cannon. The Mavericks can be configured for either anti-ship or precision strike against specific targets." Sarah considered the loadout carefully. It would give her flexibility to respond to various scenarios while maintaining the ability to operate independently for extended periods. "Intelligence update, Lieutenant," Commander Brooks interrupted, holding up a secure communication device. "We just received new information from a reconnaissance satellite." The main screen displayed fresh imagery of the hijacked vessel. Sarah immediately noticed something that others had missed. "There," she said, pointing to a section of the ship's deck. "Those aren't standard cargo containers." Davis enhanced the image, revealing what appeared to be modified shipping containers with unusual antenna arrays and equipment. "Those look like mobile missile launchers," Torres observed grimly. Sarah studied the configuration more closely. Her specialized training had included recognition of various weapon systems, and what she was seeing confirmed her worst suspicions. "Those are surface-to-ship missile systems," she said with certainty. "Probably Chinese-made C-802s based on the antenna configuration. Range of approximately 120 miles, designed specifically to target naval vessels." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The hijacked cargo ship wasn't just being used as a platform for escape. It was being converted into a floating missile battery capable of attacking Allied ships throughout the eastern Mediterranean. Commander Brooks immediately picked up the secure phone to contact Admiral Hayes. Within minutes, the Admiral entered the briefing room with a grave expression. "I just spoke with General Morrison," he announced. Satellite imagery confirms Lieutenant Chen's assessment. Intelligence now believes the hijackers plan to use the ship to attack our Mediterranean task force, which includes 2 destroyers and a cruiser currently positioned 40 miles south of the vessel. The tactical situation had just become much more urgent. If the hijacked ship reached its intended position, it would be able to target major Allied naval assets with little warning. "Sir," Sarah said, "I recommend immediate departure. Every hour we wait increases the risk to our ships and reduces our operational options." Admiral Hayes looked at his watch. "Lieutenant, it's currently 1400 hours. Optimal approach time would be during darkness, which means you wouldn't launch until 2100 hours. That gives us 7 hours to finalize preparations. Respectfully, sir, I suggest we consider an earlier departure time. If I launch at sunset, I can use the twilight period to approach undetected and be in position to observe the vessel during the transition to full darkness. This would give me better intelligence on their activities and defensive posture." The Admiral considered this carefully. Sarah's suggestion showed tactical thinking that impressed everyone in the room. "What would your approach strategy be, Lieutenant?" Sarah moved to the digital map display, using a laser pointer to trace her intended route. "I'll approach from the northwest, using these small islands to mask my radar signature. The flight path keeps me in international airspace while providing multiple options for engagement or withdrawal." She traced a complex route that avoided known radar installations and used natural terrain features for concealment. The route demonstrated sophisticated understanding of electronic warfare and stealth operations. "Once I reach the target area, I'll establish a holding pattern at low altitude, approximately 50 feet above sea level, using the ship's radar horizon to remain undetected. From this position, I can observe their activities, identify threats, and assess the situation before making contact with command." Lieutenant Torres studied the flight plan with professional admiration. The route Sarah had planned was both tactically sound and extremely challenging to execute, especially at night and at low altitude over open ocean. "What if they detect your approach?" Commander Brooks asked. "Multiple contingencies," Sarah replied immediately. "If detected during approach, I can either withdraw using these islands for cover or accelerate to attack speed and engage immediately before they can activate their weapon systems. If detected during observation, I can either climb to medium altitude and identify myself as a routine patrol or initiate immediate attack depending on the threat assessment." Admiral Hayes was impressed by the thoroughness of her planning, but he was also concerned about the risks involved in a solo mission against an unknown number of hostiles. "Lieutenant, what's your assessment of mission success probability?" Sarah paused thoughtfully before answering. "Sir, success depends largely on what we define as the primary objective. If the goal is intelligence gathering and threat assessment, success probability is high, approximately 90%. If the mission requires neutralizing the missile threat without civilian casualties, success probability is moderate, approximately 70%. If the situation requires immediate action to prevent an imminent attack on our ships, success probability is lower but acceptable, approximately 60%. Her honest assessment demonstrated professional judgment that further impressed the senior officers. Most pilots would have given overly optimistic projections, but Sarah was providing realistic tactical analysis. "And if things go wrong?" Admiral Hayes asked. "Contingency plans include withdrawal to Allied airspace, emergency landing at Akrotiri Base in Cyprus, or, if necessary, ejection over international waters with emergency beacon activation. I've calculated fuel requirements for all scenarios, including extended combat operations." General Morrison's voice suddenly came through the secure communication system. "Admiral Hayes, this is CENTCOM. New intelligence indicates the hijacked vessel may be planning to move into position for an attack as early as tonight. We need Lieutenant Chen airborne immediately." Admiral Hayes straightened up. "General, She was planning to launch at sunset for optimal positioning. Negative, Admiral. Launch her now. We just intercepted communications suggesting the hijackers are aware of our reconnaissance satellites and are planning to begin their attack sequence before our ships can be repositioned. Lieutenant Chen needs to be in position to observe and potentially intercede within the next 4 hours. The timeline had just accelerated dramatically. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of adrenaline beginning to flow as her body prepared for the intensity of combat operations. "Sir," she said to Admiral Hayes, "I can be airborne in 30 minutes. "Do it," the Admiral ordered immediately. "Lieutenant Torres, oversee final aircraft preparation. Commander Brooks, ensure all intelligence updates are transmitted to Lieutenant Chen during flight. Lieutenant Chen, you have authorization to engage if you determine civilian lives are in immediate danger or if Allied ships are under imminent threat." As officers dispersed to execute their orders, Admiral Hayes pulled Sarah aside privately. "Lieutenant, I need to ask you directly. Are you ready for this? This is not a routine mission, and you'll be operating alone in a potentially hostile environment." Sarah looked directly at the Admiral, her expression calm but determined. "Sir, this is exactly the type of mission I've been training for. I understand the risks, I've planned for contingencies, and I'm ready to execute." Admiral Hayes studied her face, seeing none of the uncertainty or bravado he might have expected from a young pilot facing such a dangerous assignment. Instead, he saw quiet confidence and professional competence. "Very well, Lieutenant. Bring our people home safe and prevent those missiles from threatening our ships." "Yes, sir." As Sarah left the briefing room to prepare for flight, Admiral Hayes remained behind, watching her go. The transformation from the quiet pilot he had been teasing that morning to the confident military professional preparing for a critical mission was remarkable. He realized that he had seriously underestimated not just Sarah's capabilities, but the importance of looking beyond surface appearances to understand the true measure of the people under his command. 30 minutes later, Sarah sat in the cockpit of her FA-18E Super Hornet, running through pre-flight checks with the precision and focus that had earned her exceptional ratings throughout her career. The aircraft was loaded with fuel and weapons, configured exactly as she had requested. As she the Admiral teased her about her call sign until Night Fox dropped and the whole command room went silent. The roar of the FA-18E's engines echoed across Naval Air Station Oceana as Sarah accelerated down the runway. Within seconds, she was airborne, climbing rapidly toward her cruising altitude. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the water below as she turned southeast, beginning her journey toward the eastern Mediterranean. During the 3-hour flight to the target area, Sarah received continuous intelligence updates through encrypted communications. The situation was evolving rapidly and not in their favor. "Night Fox, this is Control," came the voice of Commander Brooks through her headset. "We have new satellite imagery showing increased activity on the target vessel. They appear to be preparing the missile systems for deployment." Sarah acknowledged the transmission while adjusting her flight path based on the latest weather data. The winds had shifted slightly, which would affect her approach angle and fuel calculations. "Control, Night Fox. What's the status of our naval assets in the area?" "USS Monterey and USS Porter have been ordered to increase distance from the target vessel, but they're still within potential missile range. Captain Rodriguez on the Monterey is requesting immediate assessment of the threat level." As Sarah flew through the darkening sky, she reviewed her mission parameters one final time. The hijacked cargo ship was now confirmed to be carrying at least 2 mobile missile launchers, with an unknown number of hostiles aboard. Intelligence suggested between 8 and 15 armed individuals, but the exact number remained unclear. The sun was setting behind her as Sarah reached the operational area. She reduced altitude and speed, beginning her careful approach toward the target vessel. The advanced radar systems in her aircraft showed multiple contacts in the area. Allied ships maintaining safe distance, commercial traffic following normal shipping lanes, and one contact that matched the profile of the hijacked vessel. Control. Night Fox approaching target area, beginning reconnaissance phase. Copy, Night Fox. You are cleared for reconnaissance. Intelligence reports the vessel has changed course again, now heading directly toward the position of our ships. Sarah felt her heart rate increase slightly. The tactical situation was becoming more urgent by the minute. She activated her aircraft's advanced targeting systems and electronic warfare equipment, preparing for potential combat while maintaining stealth approach protocols. Flying at extremely low altitude, just 50 feet above the Mediterranean surface, Sarah approached the hijacked vessel from the northwest as planned. The advanced night vision systems in her aircraft provided clear imagery of the ship despite the gathering darkness. What she saw confirmed her worst fears. The cargo ship's deck had been cleared, and 2 mobile missile launchers were now clearly visible, elevated to firing position. Several armed individuals were moving around the deck, and she could see additional equipment that suggested a well-organized military operation rather than typical piracy. Control, Night Fox. I have eyes on target. Confirm 2 missile launchers in firing position. Repeat, weapons hot and ready for deployment. Estimate 12 to 15 hostiles visible on deck. The response from Admiral Hayes came immediately. Night Fox, what's your assessment of civilian crew status? Sarah used her advanced optics to scan the ship more carefully. Near the bridge structure, she could see several individuals who appeared to be restrained or under guard, likely the ship's original crew. Control, I see approximately 6 individuals near the bridge who appear to be crew members under guard. They appear to be alive but restrained. Copy that, Night Fox. Stand by for updated orders. Sarah maintained her position, circling the vessel at a distance that kept her outside their radar detection range while allowing her to monitor their activities. Through her aircraft's advanced sensors, she could hear radio communications from the ship, though they were in a language she didn't recognize. Admiral Hayes' voice came through her headset with new urgency. Night Fox, we just intercepted communications indicating they plan to fire on USS Monterey in approximately 15 minutes. The Monterey cannot clear the area fast enough to avoid the missiles. Sarah's training immediately kicked in. She had 15 minutes to neutralize the missile threat before Allied ships and sailors would be in mortal danger. Control, requesting immediate clearance to engage. Time-critical situation. Night Fox, you are cleared to engage. Repeat, you are authorized to use all necessary force to neutralize the missile threat. Priority is protecting the civilian crew if possible, but saving the Monterey is the primary objective. Sarah felt the familiar calm focus that she experienced during high-stress situations. Her breathing slowed, her heart rate stabilized, and her mind became completely clear. This was the moment all her training had prepared her for. She began her attack approach, using the darkness and her aircraft's stealth capabilities to position herself for maximum effectiveness. The key was to destroy the missile launchers without hitting the areas where the crew was being held. Control, Night Fox beginning attack run, engaging in 60 seconds. Sarah climbed to attack altitude and armed her precision-guided missiles. The targeting system locked onto the first missile launcher, calculating wind speed, target movement, and optimal impact angle. Night Fox, weapons hot. She fired her first AGM-65 Maverick missile, watching as it streaked toward the ship with perfect accuracy. The explosion lit up the night sky as the first missile launcher was completely destroyed. Immediately, she could see armed figures on the deck scrambling for cover and defensive positions. Without hesitation, Sarah adjusted her targeting to the second missile launcher and fired again. The second Maverick struck its target with precision, eliminating the ship's offensive capability in less than 30 seconds. Control, Night Fox. Both missile launchers destroyed. Threat to Allied ships neutralized. But even as she reported success, Sarah could see that the situation was far from over. The armed hostiles on the ship were now firing small arms at her aircraft, and she could see them moving toward the area where the crew was being held. Control, hostiles are moving toward civilian crew positions. I believe they may be planning to harm the crew in retaliation. Admiral Hayes's voice was tense. Night Fox, what are your options? Sarah assessed the situation quickly. The ship was now burning in several places from the missile strikes, but the hull appeared intact. The hostiles were regrouping, and she could see several of them dragging crew members toward what appeared to be lifeboats. Control, I'm going to make low-level passes to discourage hostile action against the crew. May need to use cannon fire for precision strikes. Authorized, Night Fox. Protect those civilians. Sarah dove toward the ship at high speed, flying directly over the deck at an altitude of less than 100 feet. The psychological effect was immediate. The hostiles scattered for cover, temporarily abandoning their plans to move the crew members. She completed several intimidation passes while calling in the positions of hostiles to Admiral Hayes, who was coordinating with other Allied ships to dispatch rescue teams. Control, USS Porter is en route to your position with a rescue team, Admiral Hayes reported. ETA 20 minutes. Sarah continued her protective overwatch, using her aircraft's powerful searchlight to illuminate hostile positions and prevent them from organizing any coordinated action against the crew. Her presence alone was keeping the situation stable until rescue forces could arrive. During one of her passes, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. Several hostiles were attempting to plant what appeared to be explosive devices near the areas where crew members were being held. Control, Night Fox. Hostiles are attempting to place explosive devices. I need to engage immediately to prevent civilian casualties. Cleared hot, Night Fox. Do what you have to do. Sarah lined up for a precision strafing run, using her aircraft's cannon to target the hostiles who were threatening the crew while avoiding any risk to the civilians themselves. The 20mm cannon fire was devastatingly accurate, neutralizing the immediate threat to the crew members. As she pulled up from her attack run, she could see the crew members moving away from the hostile positions toward a safer area of the ship. The remaining hostiles appeared to be abandoning their positions, some jumping into the water while others were raising their hands in surrender. Control, Night Fox. Immediate threat to crew neutralized. Hostiles are surrendering or abandoning ship. Crew appears to be safe and moving to secure positions. 23 minutes later, rescue teams from USS Porter boarded the damaged cargo ship and secured all remaining crew members. Medical teams confirmed that while several crew members had minor injuries, all were alive and in stable condition. Sarah remained in the area until the rescue operation was complete, providing air cover and reconnaissance as needed. Only when Admiral Hayes confirmed that all civilians were safe and the situation was fully under control did she begin her return flight to base. The flight back to Naval Air Station Oceana gave Sarah time to process what had just occurred. In less than 4 hours, she had gone from being teased about her call sign to executing a critical combat mission that saved both civilian lives and major Allied naval assets. When she landed at Oceana, the entire command staff was waiting on the tarmac. As she climbed down from her aircraft, Admiral Hayes approached with an expression very different from the one he had worn that morning. "Lieutenant Chen," he said formally, "on behalf of the Allied naval forces in the Mediterranean, I want to thank you for your exceptional performance today. Your actions saved 18 civilian lives and prevented what could have been a devastating attack on our ships." Sarah stood at attention. "Thank you, sir. I was just doing my job." Admiral Hayes shook his head. "No, Lieutenant. What you did today went far beyond duty. Your tactical skills, flying ability, and decision-making under pressure were extraordinary." He paused, looking somewhat embarrassed. "I also owe you a personal apology. This morning I made assumptions about you based on your quiet demeanor, and those assumptions were completely wrong. You have proven yourself to be one of the most capable officers I have ever had the privilege to command." No apology necessary, sir, Sarah replied simply. I prefer to let my actions speak for themselves. Lieutenant Torres stepped forward. Sarah, I flew with you before, but I had no idea you were capable of what you did today. That was some of the most precise flying and targeting I've ever seen. Commander Brooks added, The intelligence analysis you provided during the mission was crucial to our understanding of the threat. Your ability to assess and adapt to changing situations was remarkable. As the debriefing continued, word of Sarah's successful mission spread throughout the base. Pilots and officers who had barely noticed her before now looked at her with newfound respect and admiration. The next morning, Sarah was back in the same briefing room where Admiral Hayes had teased her about her call sign less than 24 hours earlier. This time, when she entered the room, every officer stood up in a gesture of respect. Admiral Hayes called for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to formally recognize Lieutenant Sarah Chen for her actions yesterday. Her successful mission not only neutralized a significant threat to Allied forces, but also demonstrated the highest levels of professional skill and personal courage. He turned to Sarah. Lieutenant, I've submitted a recommendation that you receive the Distinguished Flying Cross for your actions. You have also been selected for immediate promotion to Lieutenant Commander and assignment to our Special Operations Planning Staff. Sarah was genuinely surprised by the recognition, but she maintained her characteristic composure. Thank you, sir. I'm honored by the recognition and ready for whatever assignments you have for me. After the brief ceremony, as the other officers dispersed, Admiral Hayes approached Sarah privately. Lieutenant Commander, I have to ask, how long have you been capable of operations like this? Sarah considered the question carefully. Sir, I've been training for special operations missions since I graduated from flight school, but yesterday was the first time I had the opportunity to apply that training in a real-world situation. Why didn't you ever mention your specialized qualifications? Sir, I was taught that actions are more important than words. I preferred to prove myself through performance rather than by talking about my training. Admiral Hayes nodded slowly, finally understanding the quiet pilot who had been under his command for months without him recognizing her true capabilities. Well, Lieutenant Commander Chen, I can assure you that everyone here now understands exactly why you carry the call sign Night Fox. You've certainly earned it. Sarah smiled slightly, one of the few times any of her colleagues had seen her do so. Yes, sir. I suppose I have. From that day forward, no one at Naval Air Station Oceana ever questioned how Sarah Chen had earned her call sign. The story of the quiet pilot who had saved Allied ships and civilian lives in a single night became legend throughout the Navy. And Admiral Hayes never again made assumptions about an officer based on their surface demeanor. Sarah returned to her usual quiet professionalism, but now her colleagues understood that her silence came not from uncertainty or lack of confidence, but from the quiet assurance of someone who knew exactly what she was capable of accomplishing when the moment demanded it. The Night Fox had proven herself, and everyone who served with her would never forget the night when the command room fell silent and a hero emerged from the shadows. Prepared for takeoff, she felt the familiar calm that always settled over her before important missions. This was what she had trained for, and she was ready.